Established in 1723, the town of South Kingstown began with a population of approximately 1,500 people. Of course, at this time and through much of the 19th century, South Kingstown included the area that today is known as Narragansett. It was in 1888 that the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations passed a resolution that granted separate charters to both towns, giving each of them their own independent governments. At the turn of the 20th century, the population of the newly formed South Kingstown had grown close to 5,000 people. Much was happening in this rural seaside community. The railroad had become a major mode of transportation, linking together many of the villages. Rhode Island State College was emerging as a respected agricultural school, and the people here were developing a warmth that would encourage many future generations to make South Kingstown their home. Travel with me as we take a video postcard tour through South Kingstown, then and now. Arriving, Kingston Station. Once known as the Stonington-Providence Railroad line, these tracks were first laid out in 1837 as a means of transporting goods and persons across Rhode Island with destinations like New York City, Boston, and beyond. The locomotives then reaching speeds of up to 40 miles per hour. Today, in the year 2000, these electrified high-speed engines are often going to the same destinations, only getting there sooner as they travel at speeds exceeding 125 miles per hour. After surviving the ravages of fire in 1988 and undergoing substantial renovations, the Kingston train station remains a historically significant landmark, welcoming thousands of travelers to South Kingstown each year. Not far from the train depot stood the West Kingston Fairgrounds. A popular entertainment spot, these grounds once held activities of all kinds. Horse racing and stock car racing were among many of the sporting events held each year. The fairs also held contests for nearby farmers to see who had the biggest pig or who could grow the largest pumpkin. Now, as the millennium turns, the property is occupied by American Power Conversion, a high-technology company manufacturing auxiliary power supplies for computers. Along with their contribution to technology, APC has been a major contributor to the local, national, and international economies, employing more than 5,000 individuals worldwide. Another historically significant landmark located in West Kingston is the old Washington County Courthouse. Designed by Leslie P. Langworthy and constructed by local workers in 1894, this solid granite building reminds us of the Richardsonian, Romanesque public architecture once popular in the late 19th century. Today, the Courthouse Center for the Arts owns this stately building and uses the property to perpetuate the arts in our community. Recently renovated, the center offers a vast array of art and music programs, along with providing a place for local artists to display their talents. Next stop, Kingston Village. Here, just before the top of Kingston Hill, is the building that once served as the town's jail. Originally built in 1792, this solid granite structure is said to have cannonballs embedded in the walls to make a prisoner's escape more difficult, as the balls would presumably revolve at the touch of a prisoner's drill. The Pettaquamscut Historical Society occupies this historic building today and provides a museum of artifacts for all to enjoy. Although the cells no longer detain any wrongdoers, they continue to remind us of a time gone by. Across the then dirt road, and just a stone's throw away, stood a house built in 1740 by Nathaniel Helm, one of 5 well-known silversmiths of what was then the village of Little Rest. In 1792, the house was owned by Cyrus French, a man known for making fine beaver hats. The French house was torn down around 1930, and now 4 large brick buildings used primarily to house faculty and graduate students stand on the corner of the main road that leads to the University of Rhode Island campus. In this general view of the Rhode Island College of Agriculture and Mechanical Arts, you can see Davis Hall just left of center, along with Lippett Hall to its right. Built in 1898, Lippett Hall once served as a gymnasium constructed for the purpose of student infantry drilling. At the time this card was postmarked in 1911, fewer than 300 students attended the college. The University of Rhode Island now has an enrollment of approximately 15,000 students. Although much has changed here over the last century, the large granite buildings still remain a vital part of the campus. Looking west on Main Street in Kingston in the 1920s, one could see the French house on the right with several trees lining the road. Across the way on the left stood a Victorian home that was torn down in 1962 to make room for a church parking lot. Only the steps of the church remain and are seen today, from this view as one looks west on Route 138. This view of the Kingston Congregational Church shows the Thomas P. Wells House to the left, which became the church house in 1933. The church was built in 1820, following the congregation's gradual movement from the village of Tower Hill to what was then the village of Little Rest. It was not until 1825 that the name for the village of Little Rest was changed to Kingston. Today, the church house and sanctuary are connected by an auditorium that was constructed in 1962. Those in the village can still hear the church bell ringing from the clock tower. Two other public buildings across the main street were the Kings County Courthouse and the Old County Records Office. Built in 1775, the courthouse served as one of the 5 original state houses where the rotating General Assembly met from 1776 to 1791. The smaller granite block building, built in 1857, was reportedly the first totally fireproof building in the United States. In 1895, when a new courthouse was built in West Kingston, the first floor was remodeled for library purposes and the courtroom on the second floor converted to an auditorium. It has served the village as a library ever since. Back in the early part of the century, those in the quiet village of Kingston would often see or hear a single motor car traveling along down the middle of the dirt road, then Main Street. To the left, one can see the familiar well house where those passing by might seek to quench their thirst. Today, in February of the year 2000, you very seldom see just one vehicle on this street, for as the population of the town and university continues to grow, so grows the number of cars on the road. And the well house, although its tap no longer draws water for those passing by, the structure still stands tall and continues to remind us of yesteryear. Another view of the well house shows an early motor car heading down South Road past what was then referred to as the Elisha Reynolds House, built around 1738. It was not until 1919 that the Tavern Hall Club purchased the majestic colonial-style building to the right and converted it to clubhouse use. As you can see, the large colonial still watches over the entrance to South Road. And although the road has changed from dirt to asphalt and many of the trees no longer stand, cars still travel this direction on their way to Teft Hill, Curtis Corner, and other points south. Not far from this intersection, and just off the main street, stood the Kingston Water Tower. This tall frame structure with its gambrel-style roof once served as the water source for Kingston Village. Sometime in the 1940s, it was replaced by a more suitable tower behind the Fairweather House. Today, there is little sign that the tower existed. Once situated behind the Burn and Helm House, or what is now the South County Art Association, one can almost imagine the tower nestled behind the buildings along the main street, overlooking the village. Moving east along the main street and at the corner of what is now Route 108 stands the C.F. Brown House, built in 1889. A blacksmith shop also once occupied part of this corner lot in the 1800s. Today, in the year 2000, this recently restored home, known as the Farmer Brown House, has been converted into a bed and breakfast. Along with its elaborately designed Victorian neighbor, these two homes overlook the intersection referred to as Brown's Corner. Leaving Kingston and traveling further east on Mooresfield Road, one finds himself at the observation tower located at the intersection of Route 138 and Route 1. Constructed in 1936, the present tower, built on a high elevation along the coast, was the site of a stone lookout tower back in the 1700s. Little has changed to the tower itself over the past 60 years, and though the surrounding trees have grown high, the view remains spectacular. Arriving, Peacedale Station. Here in the village named after Rowland Hazard's wife, Mary Peace, this railroad stop often brought visitors to the area, some who came to work in the mills or shop in the flats, and others riding onto the Wakefield, Narragansett, or Kingston depots. Now, the old station, along with several other surrounding buildings, is owned by the Goriello family. This family's efforts to preserve the many local landmarks have been paramount in maintaining the historical integrity of this once bustling mill village. Here, in what was often thought of as the center of Peacedale Village, was Fisk's Flat, named after Stephen Fisk, a local mill manager and entrepreneur in the mid to late 1800s. The large federal-style building at the far right was known as Fagan's Opera House, a popular spot where locals would often gather for various forms of entertainment. Now, in the summer of the year 2000, some locals still refer to this place as the Flats. And the Island Rotary, today it is maintained by the Friends of Peacedale Association, a non-profit group organized for the betterment of Peacedale. Just north of the Flats was Rocky Brook, a small mill village situated between Peacedale and Kingston. In this postcard, dated 1912, you can see the power station, once owned by the Wakefield Water Company. Here, they would pump water from the adjacent reservoir to the area mills and nearby homes. Today, a fine dining place occupies this fabulous stone building and is appropriately called the Pump House Restaurant. Here, one can see a picture of the Peacedale Grammar School. The building was built in 1902, shortly after a fire destroyed the old building. It remained a school until 1923, at which time a new brick schoolhouse was built further down Kersey Road. The building still stands today and is occupied by Antiquity Restorations, a business known for its restoration of antique furniture. Around the corner along Kingstown Road and at the end of Columbia Street stood the Peacedale Manufacturing Company. The original mill, established by Rowland Hazard in 1802, would prove to be the engine that drove Peacedale from a small hamlet of just a few houses to a thriving mercantile center. Today, the mill buildings, now occupied by several offices, are seen here and are owned by the Goriello family. This location is also the site of an annual memorial to local firefighters who have given their lives to our community. Across the street from the mill stood Hazard Memorial Hall, as seen in this postcard with a postmark of 1915. The hall, built in 1891 as a memorial to Rowland Gibson Hazard, provided accommodations for musical productions and plays, as well as a place to hold numerous high school graduations. The Peacedale Library now occupies this stately building and continues to provide an invaluable service to the local community. Here, on the library grounds, standing as a tribute in memory of Rowland Hazard and his sons, Rowland Gibson and Frederick Rowland Hazard, is a monument sculpted by Daniel Chester French, a famous sculptor known for such works as the Lincoln Memorial and the Minuteman statue. Today, in the year 2000, the Hazard Memorial Trust, along with the town's Millennium Commission, has chosen to bring this magnificent piece of art and history back to its original beauty. Caroline Hazard shares these words at the weaver's dedication on October 23, 1920. Time and life stand behind the weaver, and life hands him the thread which is to be woven into ways of existence. You will see how wonderfully Mr. French has carried out the idea. To the rear of the library is an old home referred to as the Homestead, built around 1790. Rowland Hazard, who came to this area about 1800, was the first in the line of his family to live here. This color-enhanced photo postcard was taken about 1905. The house remained in the Hazard family until 1969. This is just one of several homes that were occupied by the Hazards throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, and today it still remains a single-family residence. Just over the road from Hazard Memorial Hall, or what is today the Peacedale Library, stands the Neighborhood Guild, built in 1908. In the foreground is the village green where, in 1907, prior to this photo, several mill houses were lined along Kingstown Road. Today, the grand building, which also includes a gymnasium, is the center of the town's recreation program. Another gathering place in Peacedale was the Dove and Distaff Tea Garden on Columbia Street, as seen here in this postcard, dating around 1915. According to the writings of Oliver Stedman, There are also homemade articles sold in the building, attracting many hotel guests and summer cottagers from nearby Narragansett and later from as far away as Jamestown and Watch Hill. With the coming of the Depression of the 1930s, trade fell off rapidly, and in 1935, the business in the building was abandoned. Today, the building is occupied by the Gates Insurance Agency. Further down Columbia Street stood the Peacedale Fire Station, which you can see behind this proud group of local firemen. This photo postcard was probably taken sometime in the 1930s. Almost 70 years later, the building still stands and is now used by the South Kingstown Maintenance Department. Today, another proud group of Peacedale firefighters gather before the Grand Firefighters Parade on September 24, 2000, in front of their station on High Street. Near the Peacedale-Wakefield border stands the Peacedale Congregational Church at the corner of Columbia Street and Church Street. Dedicated in 1872, this building gives us another example of the legacy left behind by the Hazard family, for it was Roland Hazard who, in 1870, designed the plans for this magnificent structure. Here is a view of the church in August of the year 2000. Little has changed to the front of the church since it was built 130 years ago. However, there have been several additions to the rear and sides of the building to accommodate the growing congregation. Arriving, Wakefield Station. Part of the Narragansett Pier Railroad, this station was the connection between the Peacedale and the Narragansett Pier depots. Active as a passenger service from 1876 to 1951, these lines brought hundreds of passengers in and out of South Kingstown each day. This card, with the postmark of 1911, shows a different view of where the train tracks cross Main Street. Just right of center, one could see the name of the village Wakefield, spelled out with white stones. One can also see D.B. Griffin's Pharmacy at the far right, which later became DeFonte's Drugstore. Today, the town of South Kingstown is planning the construction of a bike path where the tracks once existed, along with an intermodal park nearby. Here is a photo postcard of the U.S. Post Office on Robinson Street as it was in the 1940s. The large brick building was actually constructed in 1936, replacing the post office located in the Bell Block on Main Street. Just recently in 1998, the U.S. Postal Service vacated this building and moved to a more suitable location on Kingstown Road. Now, this stately building is referred to as the Wakefield Professional Building and is occupied by a number of professional offices. Main Street, Wakefield. This watercolored postcard shows you a view of old Wakefield in the early 1930s. Back then, coal, which you could purchase at J.C. Tucker's store, as seen to the right, was a primary source of heat for many of the homes in the area. On September 24th in the year 2000, a videographer took this view of Main Street during the South County Firefighters Memorial Millennium Parade. The parade began here in Wakefield and stretched all the way to the towers at Narragansett Pier. Further down Main Street stood the Wakefield Elementary School, with its original construction on this site dating back to 1849. This card, postmarked June 3, 1907, shows the school after its several additions. Today, the site shows a building that was built in the late 1920s by the Wakefield Trust Company and is now occupied by the Markarian and Meehan accounting firm. Over Main Street and across the wooden footbridge, one can see the Wakefield Grammar School that was built in 1908, replacing the older, less accommodating schoolhouse. Unfortunately, this building was destroyed in 1963 by a fire believed to have been started by faulty wiring on the auditorium stage. Shortly after the fire, a new single-story school was built and still stands. Currently, grades 1 through 6 are taught here. And, as you can see, a footbridge still spans the Saugatucket River. Here is another view of the grammar school overlooking the Saugatucket River and the Wakefield Mill Dam. Mill buildings located along the river were once common here in South Kingstown, as water power was responsible for turning the large industrial looms. Although the overgrown trees block the view of the dam and the river today, Water still flows down the sunny Saugatucket. Across the street from the dam stood the Wakefield House, a country inn providing accommodations to travelers passing through or visiting South Kingstown. Today, the land is occupied by several businesses, notably McGrath's Package Store and others that make up the River's Edge Shopping Center. Here is a postcard showing Main Street, Wakefield in the early part of the 20th century, when the horse and carriage were still the main form of road travel. Just left of center, one can see Bell Block, built by Lewis F. Bell in 1899, along with the John L. Sheldon building, which was actually moved to the location seen to the left that same year. As you can see, the tall buildings still remain a vital part of the Wakefield Business District. This is also the location of the Harvest Moon Oktoberfest, a block party sponsored by the Wakefield Downtown Merchants Association. Another tall building along Main Street was known as the Bank Building, situated just west of the Saugatucket River. The building was home to the Wakefield Institution for Savings from 1904 to 1927. It was in 1924 that a fire destroyed the third floor, reducing the building to 2 stories. Now, the building is the home of Damon's Hardware, a successful retail hardware store owned and operated by David and Tony Chappell. In this view of the bank block, one can see the 2-story granite building to the right, which was the first home of the Wakefield Bank and later named the Wakefield Trust Company. Today, the building is part of Damon's Hardware and houses the plumbing and heating supplies. Truly one of the most notable landmarks in Wakefield is the Larchwood Inn, an elegant country inn at the base of Sugarloaf Hill. Built as a home in 1831 by mill owner James Robinson, it was first known as the Larches for the trees on the property. When this card was published around 1910, the Larches was a private residence. Today, in the year 2000, the Larchwood Inn is owned and operated by Frank and Diane Browning. Along with its excellent food and overnight accommodations, the inn features weekly entertainment provided by Wes Goff and the Jazz Strollers. Here is a view looking down Main Street from Sugarloaf Hill. Postmarked in 1906, this card had a note written below the picture, which was common practice on the earlier cards, as the opposite side was restricted to address only. Again, although the road has changed from dirt to asphalt, and many of the trees no longer stand, the view is recognizable as you can still see the granite wall in front of the Larchwood Inn to the left. At the corner of High Street and Main Street was the Wakefield Mill, which began as a grist mill sometime around 1750. The 3-story granite building seen here was built in 1872. In this postcard dating around 1910, one could see the large tree on the left providing shade over a watering trough. Although the watering trough and large tree no longer exist, a small island rotary still lies in the middle of the road. And today, the mill building at 10 High Street is occupied by a number of different businesses. Further up High Street stood the St. Francis Catholic Church and Rectory. Initially a Baptist church, the building was torn down around 1932 after a granite structure across the street was built. As you can see, the rectory still stands. However, the adjacent lot where the church once existed remains vacant except for a few trees and shrubs. Another notable building on High Street is the South Kingstown Town Hall, which was built in 1877. It was constructed in this location because the distance to the meeting place at the Kingston Courthouse was too far to travel for those town officials living in Point Judith. Although the fall foliage blocks much of the view, behind the trees the town hall still stands tall and strong. And inside, numerous meetings take place regularly where board members, council members, and residents chart the course for South Kingstown's future. Here is a postcard of the old South Kingstown High School at the corner of School Street and Columbia Street. Dedicated in 1911, this building was used as a high school until the present building opened in 1954. For many years after its use as a high school, Hazard School, as it was called, was used for grades 5 and 6, and today is used as a kindergarten. Moving down Columbia Street toward Main Street, one could see the Masonic Temple with its colonial revival facade. Built in 1903, this building served the Masons until 1992, when it was torn down to make way for a new building. Set slightly off the road relative to the old temple, The new building, built in 1993, continues to serve the Masons. Further along Columbia Street stood the Grand Army of the Republic building. Built in 1890, this brick and granite structure stood as a virtual memorial to local veterans of the Civil War. For much of the 20th century, the building was referred to as the Columbia Lodge of Oddfellows, or Oddfellows Hall. In 1978, the building was torn down, and today, the area is used as a funeral home parking area seen across the street from the campus cinema. Back on Main Street is a view of what was then referred to as Columbia Corner around 1910. Earlier in the 19th century, this area was called Armstrong's Corner, named after the famous Armstrong carriage family, as they owned much of the property here. Today, this corner marks the midway point between the old Main Street Business District to the west and the more recently developed Business District to the east. Around the turn of the century, everyone in town, especially the children, knew of Maine's Ice Cream. Located at the corner of Main Street and Kingstown Road, this fabulous factory began in 1884 and ran continuously until 1986. Now at this location, a scoop of ice cream has been replaced with the best-eaten coffee and donut. To the right of the ice cream plant stood a house occupied by the William Main family. 100 years ago, this was one of very few buildings situated in the Dale-Carlia area. Now, in the year 2000, Main Shopping Center occupies this site and provides a variety of retail stores. Here is a postcard showing a view of Silver Lake, a body of water situated on the edge of town near Narragansett. Pristine and clear, the lake is one of several bodies of fresh water in South Kingstown. Little has changed to the lake itself over the last 100 years, and although many new homes and condominiums have been built overlooking its shores, its beauty remains intact. Not far from Silver Lake was the boat landing at Salt Pond, seen here in this card, dating around 1915. Situated almost 3 miles from the open ocean, this cove offered boaters a safe berth away from the high ocean winds and surf. Here in October of 2000 is a view from the deck of Stone Cove Marina, where boaters have been preparing their vessels for their winter rest. Before leaving the village of Wakefield, one must visit the South County Hospital, seen here in this postcard, dating around 1940. Dedicated on November 28, 1925, this building replaced a less accommodating hospital, which was situated on Kenyon Avenue, closer to Main Street. At this new facility, 42 beds were available for patient care. Now, in the year 2000, the South County Hospital is viewed throughout Rhode Island as a state-of-the-art facility, employing an outstanding staff and some of the finest physicians. There are now 100 beds for patient care. Here is an aerial view showing the expanded hospital grounds overlooking the marinas. Leaving Wakefield, we travel to deliver mail to a home in the outlying village of Matunic. An Indian name meaning lookout, Matunic is an area in the western part of South Kingstown, where gentle rolling hills gaze over scenic coastline. The first home we visit when entering the hills of Matunic is what many believe to be the birthplace of Oliver Hazard Perry. Born in 1785, Oliver Hazard Perry was best known for his heroism in the War of 1812 and his command of the Lake Erie Naval Force. Situated just off the Old Post Road, the Perry homestead still stands amidst stone walls and green meadows. Today, the road that passes by is aptly named the Commodore Perry Highway. Another home along Old Post Road was the summer residence of Edward Everett Hale, as seen here in this card postmarked 1908. Noted as the author of A Man Without a Country, Edward Everett Hale truly must have received inspiration for some of his writings while looking out over Matunic. Sitting on a hill, the ocean on one side and Wash Pond on the other, this is certainly a home with a view. Not far from here, and situated on the southerly side of the Old Post Road, stood a drinking fountain erected by Wager Whedon, a Matunic farmer. Inscribed on this granite stone are the words, "To Wager Whedon, who lived on this farm from 1826 to 1863, and brought this water here. Matunic, 1876. Although the stone is in plain sight and set only 10 feet off Route 1 North, few people see this tablet of yesteryear, as cars now quickly pass by. Here is a postcard showing a general view of the Matunic beach area in the 1920s. Side by side, these automobiles park in walking distance to the nearby shoreline. It wasn't until sometime in the 1940s that Arthur B. Carpenter Sr. began leasing this corner property to individuals looking to build small cottages here. The close proximity to the ocean and beach made this an ideal location for those desiring a summer getaway. In this card, postmarked 1923, is a view of the Matunic Beach House, built in 1871 by Wanton R. Carpenter. The 65-room hotel was reportedly the first hotel erected along the Matunic beachfront. In 1947, the Matunic Beach House was demolished to make way for a parking area. Today, another building is seen occupying this site that looks over the Atlantic Ocean and Block Island Sound. Truly one of South Kingstown's most valuable natural resources is seen here in this postcard showing the bathing beach at Matunic in the early 1900s. Many of the houses depicted in this view were destroyed by the high winds and surf of the 1938 hurricane. Another view of the beach shows bathers in the early part of the 20th century. People would flock to this area, traveling from places throughout Rhode Island and other surrounding states to enjoy the sun, surf, and fresh ocean breeze blowing along the Matunic shoreline. Things have quieted down now at this point in the year. It is in the fall of the year 2000. The beachgoers have packed up their belongings, and many have gone back to their inland homes. It is safe to say, however, that of those people that have experienced the Matunic shoreline, visited the University of Rhode Island campus, read the inspiring words on the Daniel Chester French Monument, or taken a stroll down Main Street in Wakefield, all realize how good the times were and continue to be in South Kingstown.